Hi, you've got Tiffany Yu here. My pronouns are she, her, and you are tuning in to this episode of Diversibility Amplified, where we are chatting with our community members a little to learn a little bit more about their advocacy and their journey to becoming proud to be disabled. So this is a special mini series I'm creating in the lead up to the launch of the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. I am showing, if you are watching the video version, an advanced reader review copy of my book that has this bright orange gradient background. And Arthur is actually in the book. So our guest today is Arthur Gwynne. He heads up operations for the award-winning platform Ramped, recording artists and music professionals with disabilities, where he has collaborated with the likes of Netflix and the Recording Academy to build inclusive programming. He also manages the career of globally touring recording artist, charting songwriter, and cultural activist Lachi, who is the go-to voice on disability culture in the music industry through her work on the Grammys board and as the CEO of Ramped. And throughout the course of this mission work, Arthur stepped away from a career in executive recruitment and opened up publicly about his own neurodiversity. Today, Arthur runs a robust, diverse team, booking national tours, negotiating major contracts, working everything from creative projects and music releases to development programs from cradle to grave. He has made it his mission to break down the silos and barriers holding back the disability community, laying seeds for a national conversation on disability culture and what inclusion and universal accessible design means at a practical and industrial level. Beyond all of this, Arthur is Lachi's stylist and designs her iconic glam canes. Uh, that was actually my first time reading Arthur's bio out loud. But Arthur, do you want to say hi and provide a visual description for our listeners and viewers?
Yes, and actually my camera just went out for some freaking reason, so while I poke with that.
I
Yeah, hi,
think
my
your
name
camera heard me.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, my name is Arthur. I'm a big and tall white guy with way too much red hair, and I identify as neurodivergent. And yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Here we are. Great to be with you. Yeah, I do operations for Ramped, and I've been Lachi's business manager for a few years now. And just excited to be talking with you again.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Well, so I actually think it'd be interesting. I know a little bit of the story, but I'd love to know, like many of us within the disability community know Lachi. We may not know you because you said you're more the background ops guy, but now you're getting your your opportunity to have some time on the mic. But how did you originally get connected to Lachi? What made you want to step away from executive recruitment to more of this space around really changing disability culture and uplifting disability culture?
Yeah. So pre-COVID, I was working for the AESC, which is the Association of Executive Search Consultants. And I was kind of doing like the e-commerce side on a platform that helps executives further their careers. So they get like career training, they get connected with search consultants and resume review and all that kind of stuff. Um, and yeah, I like my job. It was interesting. I was, learning that the sea level, it's the exact same people as someone that buys batteries at, Walmart. Like everyone's the same, no matter how high up a hierarchy you go. You have the same kind of people complaining about the same kind of things. And so it was interesting seeing the world through that perspective and kind of like being on the other side of like that veil of how we see corporate roles. Um, but the search industry itself wasn't exactly progressive, right? Like the big idea the whole time I was there is like, hey, maybe we should slowly be introducing the idea of women being on in leadership positions every once in a while. Let's set a 20-year goal to, just really slow moving things, not a lot of progressive conversations happening. Um, and when COVID hit, especially, I was just kind of like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I'm not doing, oh my goodness gracious. Well, sorry about that. I
You
don't
know,
know what's
you
up with
are
my camera.
representing Ramped, and so there's a very artistic thing happening on the screen. Um, but but when we first started recording, you did ask, you said, "Hey, is the video being recorded?" And maybe that was just the time for the video to say, it's my turn to have my own show."
Yeah, let's I'm gonna give it one more go, but if it blinks out like that again, I'll just keep it off. But anyway, sorry. Um, so I had really kind of been itching to do something more impactful, right? And I didn't really know what that meant. I started getting a little bit more into like local politics and joined my community board and but it didn't really feel like it was doing all that much. But I also didn't have a lot of time for it, right? Because I had a full-time job and everything. When COVID hit and we all started working from home, I was like the corporate culture guy. You know what I mean? Like I've enjoyed being in a corporate environment. It puts you in a nice little box where I can be in a nice little box and I don't have to figure out complexities of social interactions outside of how I'm supposed to interact with coworkers. You know what I mean? And so like it was a really easy way for me to socialize without uh, dealing with some of the harder things for doing that more casually for me. And so I was so resistant to like the idea of working from home. You know what I mean? I had never allowed it with my employees. Every time I was in charge, um, I always wanted to keep that office culture going. So when we were forced to work from home, it took me like 2 months to acclimate. But as soon as I did, I started realizing just how much energy I suddenly had. And I hadn't realized how much of myself was being expended just on my commute to work, just from having those office interactions that I were still challenging for me, like someone coming up at my cubicle while I'm working, or like when we do like an office party or something, or the mundane activities or whatever. And I found I finally had energy to start doing that thing I wanted to do that impact. So I started kind of looking around. And at the same time, Lachi, for her career, she was a musician up to that point. In the dance world, she hadn't been talking about her disabilities or anything. But her manager had passed away early on, and so she too had to like reconfigure what was her strategy going forward, and she wanted to start incorporating talking about her disability, being having low vision. And so she was looking for someone to help her develop a business, and I was looking for someone doing something cool that I could help develop a business. And so it was like it was a real kind of kismet situation. At first, it was just something I'm doing on the side. We're just kind of like tossing things back and forth, and she's talking about the stuff that she wants to do. And I just got more and more into it. Uh, Eventually, we started like she had another manager in the UK, and they were kind of doing the music management stuff, and I was backseat driving. And then I just kind of was like, wait, I can do this. You know what I mean? It wasn't like it was just business stuff. I'd always thought the music industry was rough and tumble, meeting in bars, deals on napkins kind of stuff. But like, no, there was a whole lot of like just regular commercial industry happening with like Zoom meetings and contracts and all the stuff that I understood. And so one thing kind of led to the other, but I kind of took over and really got into it. I started traveling with Lachi as her sighted companion, and around that time, uh, you know, I had found that I was spending a lot more time doing Lachi stuff than I was doing my other work. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm doing my job. I'm good at my job, but like I'm traveling a lot. I'm not telling them that like working out of hotel rooms and stuff, but it's all remote, so it's none of your business anyway, like whatever. But it came to a head 3 years ago. We were at the Grammys, because Lache had been doing the work with the Grammys, which with Ramped and everything. And my boss had called us all in to do our first in-person meeting in 2 years, right? And so I was like, I was already in LA for it, or, I'm sorry, in Las Vegas. And I was like, oh, I can't, I'm sick, whatever. I couldn't make it in, I just copped out, and then we went to the Grammys. The next day, my boss calls me and she's like, where are you? And there's this article going around of Ramped at the Grammys, and my dumbass is sitting there all proud in my tux next to them. And so my secret life had been outed, and I was kind of given a choice of like, well, I can keep my job or keep doing whatever that is, and decided to keep doing whatever that is, and that's what I'm doing now. And it's been it took about a year of that for me to start being more public about my own neurodiversity and talking about it. I mean, my whole life had been about uh, adapting, right, and fitting in and being normal or whatever. And when I really started getting comfortable, more because of just talking to all the cool people that we were collecting around ourselves, um, I started kind of saying it, and people were like, well, duh, you know what I mean? I stopped masking, whatever that meant. And it's like my behavior didn't really change. It was just all the internal mechanism, all the stuff I was doing just to myself. And and now I kind of get to encourage other people on that kind of disclosure or identity journeys as they're joining Ramped or just having discussions with people. And it's just been really cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think you and Lachi went to college together, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean, yeah, no, we've known each other for forever. Yeah,
I
I
feel
went to
like that's an important part of the story where it's like you've known each other for forever, and it just so happens that during the pandemic, both of you are in this transition time period and reconnect, or I don't know if you've stayed connected through this whole time. But I wanted to kind of segue off of just it seems like the pandemic became a really transformative time for both of you. So I wanted to share the quote that you shared with me that is included in the book, and then ask you a question about it. But essentially it says, when COVID hit, Lachi was in a uniquely prepared position. Artists were scrambling as studios shut down, but with a studio set up at home that fit her needs, Lachi was writing and producing twice as fast and with far more confidence than she had been when she was renting studios. I also found myself thriving during the shutdown. With the office moving to remote work, no commute, no draining small talk, I found myself awash with boundless energy. And with an improved mood and a self-built home office of my own, my productivity skyrocketed. Lachi's brewing success manifested into self-confidence and acceptance of her disabilities and neurodivergences. She began speaking up about it and the lack of disability representation in the music industry. My difference and lived experience are an asset, and when I'm accommodated right, I'm an expletive wizard. This is just one of the many examples of how prioritizing accessibility and honoring accommodations really allow people in all walks of life and stages in their careers to flourish and truly contribute to the betterment of our world in the way only they in the way only they and the mind and the body with which they came can. A life of navigating a world that was not built for us made us both creative, innovative, and driven, powerful traits we were able to explore once our access needs were met. So you kind of shared, like, originally you were all about this office culture. With this introduction of remote work, again, you realized you had so much more energy and then started sharing more about your own story. And I guess I'm curious if you felt like there was a turning point or some moment. I call this the shame to pride transformation, where originally you felt like you were masking your words to then starting to open up more about it because you realized that when your access needs were met, you could really thrive and flourish.
Yeah, honestly, this is actually still something I'm currently exploring. Uh, so when I say neurodiverse, right, I'm even using that term to be relatively ambiguous, but I've been trying to understand what it really means. As a child and adolescent, I was diagnosed with several things like bipolar, depression, ADHD, and a few others. I was heavily medicated through most of my, young adult life, and I hated everything about that. And so I spent a lot of time making sure that I didn't stand out so that I wouldn't get hammered back into place again. And so that's why corporate life was great, because it wasn't that I was being shoved into a corporate box. It's that I knew where all the walls were. They're written in a freaking book. Like there's an HR policy, like there's rules, there's structure, there's things that I can just follow and obey. And then I'm I can succeed. I can thrive. I can be put to use. You know what I mean? I can have a productive life where I'm not being exposed to whatever was triggering me or causing episodes, while also not having to medicate beyond. I'm openly very a pothead, so like I smoke a lot. That's my medication now. But I'm not on any like medication anymore. Um, oh god damn it, the fucking anyway. All right, that's it for the camera. Uh, it's only while I'm talking,
We
right?
we
Like I
know we
said,
know what
you're
we do know what you look like, and you provided a visual description.
okay. All right. I apologize about that. Um, but so over these past couple of years, as I've been openly identifying, right, I haven't had an adult diagnosis. I've had things I suspected. I do and still suspect I might be on the spectrum, around Asperger's or something, but I don't have any diagnosis in that. But the ones I really wanted to figure out was what had been identified as bipolar. Like, am I bipolar or not? And I'm not. I'm bipolar, but I have something similar called IED, which is intermittent explosive disorder. Um, and so it functionally, like culturally, it's fairly similar to bipolar, and that's why it's often confused, but there's not a chemical aspect to it. It's really more behavioral. And on the one hand, it's like, well, that's good because that diagnosis doesn't include medication or anything. But on the other hand, what's bad is that it's really just about self modulation. And it's like the biggest thing, if you look it up, as soon as you Google, it's like, what do you do about it? It's like, well, have good regular sleep, healthy diet, and exercise. Three things I do not do at all. And I was like, well, fuck, like, and it's been about like 2 months now where I've really kind of been trying to understand this and trying to integrate it because I preach about self accommodation, right? Especially in this industry. The music industry is not for it's not healthy for anybody. And it's not healthy for neuronormative folks. It's not healthy for non-disabled folks. It's not healthy for anybody. But figuring out how to not just get by, but to thrive with the way that I need to live and what makes me productive. I've already been coaching folks on that for a while now through Ramped, and so I started applying it to myself. And so things like no more red eye flights. I don't care what the situation is or how important it is or how much more expensive it is. I'm not taking a red eye because it will ruin my next day, and I'm not useful to myself. I'm not useful to Lachi. I'm not useful to anybody if that happens. I don't really drink anymore, even though I'm surrounded by alcohol. And it does expose me to like the sober movement in the music industry and how important that is. Um, and I like it's allowed me to construct my work structure in a way that is uniquely productive for myself so that I can be fully activated the whole time. And it's, I mean, I've just did a panel a few weeks ago with Music Managers Forum with some Ramped folks, Jayoko and some others. And we were talking about accommodations for ADHD in a similar way. Cause I do have ADHD as well. And the thing that I had to do was my calendaring, right? So I'm very stringent with my calendar. I use Calendly, I use Zoom, I use all these things to schedule my day. I've got my, robot house robot yells my calendar at me every 10 minutes. You know what I mean? But that's what allows me to do what I need to do. And because it's a tool that I can hone and craft and skills that I can hone and craft, I end up actually being really good at it, better than someone that doesn't have to spend that much energy to kind of be at the competitive angle. And so I get to really lean in on my weaknesses until they're my strengths. And I get to develop a unique structure that benefits just me instead of the other way around of trying to make myself benefit the structure that I'm in.
I love that. A lot to unpack there. I think my takeaway is that really finding the tools that work for you is it's just part it you know you I call it like a medication cocktail, you know, those were also tools that was not
Mhm.
working, right? And so then you found these other things like your calendar. And I also live on my calendar too. Sometimes when my friends text me and ask me to catch up, I send them a link to my Calendly and they'll say, "Oh, I just want to call you out of the blue." And I'm like, "No one other than my mother, I think no one calls me out of the blue
I
because
was actually just gonna say I gave my mom my Calendly link because I was like, listen, I'm not gonna call you, so just please just put a time in every couple months and let's chat, you know.
I love that. Well, one thing you said the music industry is not healthy for anybody. So I want to talk a little bit about Ramped. Again, Ramped is the recording artists and music professionals with disabilities. Kind of some of the things you're working on there. You know, I'm not sure if our listeners know like what ops people do. You know, I think people will look at me, Tiffany, they'll look at Lachi, they'll just think our lives are all great, but there's so many people in the background who are keeping all the things running. So yeah, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your involvement with Ramped, some of the big wins you've had, and your role specifically there.
Yeah, 100%. Ramped is it's structured as a business, right? So now we have a fiscal sponsor that allows us to accept donations and work with grants, but we do operate as a for-profit business, you know, nominally as like God, this camera. It waits until I start talking. I'm sorry. I wanted to keep trying. Um the and it always completely throws me off too. What was it just saying?
I was asking about Ramped, your role specifically on the ops side, and what some of the wins have been.
Sure.
And you were talking about how it
Um
operates as a business.
yeah. So we operate as a business. So like there's definitely a business side to it, and we structured it like a business. So when I say operations, I like operations because even in like a corporate environment, it's kind of like it still translates as wizard. So like I get to just be like, where's the problem and I'll fix it. It's like I may not be the best one to fix it. I may not be the best one to do a role, but I'm going to make sure that all the things that need to be done are getting done. And then I make sure that we're hiring the people that can do it better, that we're setting up the processes that allow it to be done better, that our biggest problems are resolved and like our biggest wins are, hunted on. So um, in a matured business, operations will really kind of be like keeping connected with like your partners and your vendors, monitoring budgets, technology updates and product releases, kind of just making sure all the different pieces of a machine are talking to each other and collaborating. Not so much a conductor, but more like an engineer in a tower, making sure all the gears are greased, right? But in something like Ramp, where we're really just kind of like, we're not even really a startup. The business was started just so that we had a business entity to do things as. And so really in the beginning, it was just like an LLC so that we could, participate in certain things. But we built it out pretty quick. So Lachi's our CEO now, formally. And then we've got myself doing operations. Anya Chernoff does our program management, and we have Sal Lopez who does our content management. And what I really kind of do is just make sure all those folks have the resources they need. Uh, I connect with all the member stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. And then I try to build the relationships that lead into our next partnerships or opportunities. And as we staff up or expand our programming, then I'm really just the one to make sure that we establish what those roles are and help get them trained in those roles. And once we solve one big problem, then I just find the next problem to solve after we have other people doing it. Um, Now, what's really unique about Ramped is the member side. So as an entity, Ramped is really just it's a community. It's this we've got a broad community, like anyone can come if you go to ramped.org and register on the site, and you're in our community. Like you'll get our newsletters, you can access our like Discord and everywhere that we're chatting and stuff. Um, but we've got members who go through a verification process, which is called like to be a pro member, a professional member. That means that they've been vetted by other pro members. as being professionals in the industry and as identifying as disabled or neurodiverse or having a rare disease or chronic illness or something in that vein, um, uh, to join the pro community. And what the pro members do is we have an executive committee, uh, which essentially functions as an oversight committee. It's ensuring that what Ramped does and how Ramped is doing things and who we're doing it with always aligns with the goals of our community. And those goals are to promote inclusion and disability identity and culture throughout the music industry. Right. So we don't service the disability community. We service the music industry. We don't teach about, how to make your place accessible. We want folks talking about why you would even want to do that in the first place. You know what I mean? It's not about compliance. It's about cultural inclusion. And so when I say the industry is bad for everybody, like I've been saying this fairly recently, I don't know if I should be saying it, but it's like we we we're not here to fix the music industry. We just want the music industry to be as shitty to disabled folks as they are to everybody else, you know? And so like we're not going to like we're working with Live Nation. We're working with the Grammys. Like they're not necessarily like the angels like perched on a shoulder, right? Um, but we can't fix how those operate. But what we can do is make sure that as they're doing things, they are recognizing the purchasing power of our community, the talent, the storylines, the humanity, the dignity that we all share and all deserve to be a part of, and how culture in general is continuing to move to that holistic viewpoint, right? Of like let's be inclusive and let's see the inclusion. And it's not about keeping it in a little corner for compliance reasons, right? This is about proper integration. Um, and it's been really kind of interesting trying to develop what that really looks like as a service. And we've had a lot of great wins with the folks that we're already working with. And I'm really excited for what's coming in the future. But I think the actual long lasting impact that we're making is the community that's being formed with those pro members. Not only are they making the decisions for what we're doing as a organization, but more importantly, they're being encouraged to go and do what they think is important. And not everyone's out here to be a disability advocate. About half of our pro members have gone through a verified process, which means that they were trained on like our language usage and like what Ramped is about and what we're presenting so that they can attend panels and stuff on our behalf. But the other half of the pro membership hasn't really done that because they're not really here to be part of that discussion. They just want to live their life. They want to pursue their careers. They want to make their art, and they don't necessarily want to be defined by disability, but they want to find a place where they can talk about that and not be alone with the experience either. And I think that's what's really great about it because it really is turning into this, melting pot of ideas and motivations and strategies and career paths and genres and everything. We're seeing collaborative efforts coming out of it. We're seeing folks like starting initiatives to kind of like prove their interpretation of how their bodies and minds are able to participate in the industry and then challenging the industry directly to do the same thing. So things like Culture City and getting sensory spaces and major venues and stuff. That conversation is really taking fire and growing. Sober Nation, which is under Live Nation, they're really making an actual concerted effort for making sober, safe, integrated places in their venues. All of these conversations are our conversation, and it's like it's not necessarily like, okay, learn these 5 things and then you're an expert, right? It's really just more learning how to be empathic and how to spread empathy and building a parallel power structure of folks who are already in that mindset that just can overwhelm all the other mindsets that we find in this industry. You know what I mean? It's like there's 1,000 little cracks on the door now, and they're all stemming from this idea of authenticity and just like actually treating people like people. Um, so I don't really know where our future is going to take us. I think we're going to do amazing things as an industry provider. I think we're really going to have like very loud and accessible programming uh, that we're going to see prop up all over the place. But ultimately, I think it's the community that's having the biggest impact. And as time goes on, that community impact, we can't even begin to imagine where it's actually going to lead to. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I love that. And, at Diversibility, we run a cross industry community as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember in the early days, people would come to us and they say, "Oh, like what advocacy issues are you tackling?" And I said, the first thing we need to learn is that we have power and influence
Mm-hmm.
together. And then you determine what the things are that you want to work on. Maybe they are connected to changing the faces of certain industries like the music industry, or maybe you want to be more connected to different disability advocacy issues. But there's kind of that first point of entry to of having a community so that you realize you're not alone. And I appreciate you naming that. One question I do have is, you do so much work supporting Lachi's career, and we all love Lachi. Oh, and I think I have to disclose that I'm also on the advisory council, the advisory board of Ramped as well, and
Yes.
have gotten to be witness to some of the great work that not only you've already done, but some of what's to come, which I'm super excited about. But how do you find your own voice while supporting someone else who has a very distinct voice as well?
Well, I think about 90% of it, at least for me, is that Lachi is actively encouraging me to. So like I am slightly being pushed out the nest, so to speak, on being more vocal. But part of it too is I don't know. I mean, I've always, like I said, I liked corporate culture because it was a box that I could fit myself into. And I've never really wanted to stand out like that. You know what I mean? Like I was absolutely content not being the center of attention. Um, we're gonna try this one more time because I have a different camera, and if this one does it, then it's my computer and not the camera, and then that's a whole other problem. Uh, the uh, but I would not be doing this if I wasn't being encouraged by Lachi to do so. But it's also not kind of like I'm not necessarily trying to make a platform, but it's more what I came to realize is I had been taking calls for almost 2 years straight, talking to people about Ramped, right? Whether they're prospective members, prospective partners, and I just fell in love with those conversations because like each person I got to talk to, it's almost like 50-50 chance I'm either helping them through the right there on a call, helping someone through like a disclosure journey, like which is very intimate and like wild. Or it would be someone who already knew about themselves but didn't have that community aspect. And we're just now getting this idea like I don't have to do this alone. And I just was giving that thing I was missing before COVID, right? The part that I wasn't, the fulfillment I wasn't getting. I was getting that every day, 5 times a day, because I was taking all these calls. Now, as things continue to build up with Lachi's platform, with the Ramped, I have to do actual work. I can't just, gab with people all day long. But it allowed me to be really connected with our members on a one-on-one basis and know what they're doing and just plug them all together. And I love that. It's just so energizing to be able to just be that conductor of just saying like you guys are doing the same thing, just smush them together and something will happen. I don't even keep track of it, just do something together, you know what I mean? And so I've been doing a lot more of that and figuring out how to activate the community within itself for doing like regional meetings and like other ways to get them all connecting with each other and generating together rather than trying to like be a part of all that stuff. We want everyone to be growing regardless of us being actual humans running the place, right? Um, but you know what? I lost track of what the question was. I'm sorry.
I was just asking, how do you find your own voice when you are
Oh,
supporting Lachi, who has her own distinct voice?
sure. Yeah. So that's where my voice developed. It's like as I was having these conversations, I realized that I was developing my own kind of ideology here, right? Like I'm specifically looking at it from the neurodiversity angle, and it like invisible disability side, energy disabilities, sensory disabilities, those kind of things. I got to talk to a lot of different folks from a very, very wide spectrum of conditions or what have you, um, and see the similarities and the differences, right? And really kind of find an identity that even though I didn't really know or understand my own specific diagnosis identity, I guess, I kind of feel like those two words conflict. I don't know where I am on that conversation, but
Well, one thing we say is that a formal diagnosis is a privilege, and self-diagnosis is a diagnosis.
sure, fair enough. It was hard to even get. It took me like 6 months of navigating the U.S. healthcare system, and I hate it anyway because that's its own trauma. That's why anyway. I forgot what I was talking about again.
You were saying you kind of wanted to come at this from the neurodiversity angle, and you
Right.
were talking to all these people who had different neurodivergences, and do you think that helped you figure out where you wanted to be in this space?
Yeah, I mean, even just disclosing the IED diagnosis, right? Like I'm trying to head on against shame associated with that, right? And it's like I don't know how I feel about saying it publicly, but I know how I felt about not saying it publicly for most of my life, and I hated that. So I might as well try this out.
Mm.
And I don't know, like I'm in uncharted territory, which is not where I usually find myself. I usually have a very structured, thing. And now but there's no structure in my life anymore at all, except for what I decide. And it turns out I kind of like that. You know what I mean? It's like if I'm working at 10 p.m., it's because I want to be. And if I cut myself off at 10 p.m., it's because I need to be. So it's empowering, but it's also like I couldn't recommend this to anyone because it's difficult, right? Like it, it takes a lot of I don't want to say discipline, but more, at least for me, I'm the kind of person that learns best by touching the hot pan. And so I have to continuously learn a lot of hard lessons as I'm building something from scratch rather than accepting a preordained model. But as I'm exploring that, I think documenting that is most important, because the thing that I think we're really missing is like we're seeing portrayals of neurodiversity in media, but we're not really understanding the like. I think I just feel like we need to talk more about the harder side of this. Like there's a quote I really liked during the Kanye thing, and I thought I saw it on Reddit or something, but it was like mental health isn't a burden, but it's a responsibility, right? And so I feel like part of my responsibility, if I'm going to be the one going around trying to help people understand how they can combat shame while also holding on to understanding that there's certain things where you can't ask everyone else to just adapt to your needs. Like if you're trying to do something, especially again, Ramped is for professionals, right? Ramped is for people who are making careers. It's a place for people that are pursuing um, uh, goals like that. You know what I mean? It's not to say that what we're talking about applies to everyone who just wants access to music, like music therapy, access to music education, all of those kind of things. They're super important. And they're entire conversations that should be happening, getting the support they need. But Ranch is specifically for folks that are pursuing a career. And there are areas where we can really ask or demand for accommodation, but there's also that keyword in there of reasonable, right? And part of that is like, I can't just ask my staff um, to, oh, well, here's what to do if Arthur starts having an emotional episode. You know what I mean? That's not in anybody's purview. And if I need someone that's going to be there because something might happen, that's on me to have someone there that's part of my accommodation and isn't just my staff dealing with the situation that isn't their responsibility. And it's the kind of thing that I want to explore non-privately, at least in smaller discussions, if not necessarily like, I'm not like a social media. I barely have social media. I have a TikTok that I sometimes post stuff to, and then the Glam Canes has an Instagram account that's I'm technically managing, but I'm not really there for that kind of stuff. But if I am going to be talking about these narratives, that's where I want it to be of like trying to find that line between, instead of saying society come to me, it's more kind of like, how can I best come to society um productively, and something dot dot dot. I don't know. It's not a fully thought out question, but it's that's what I'm trying to explore. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing from your own narrative, this transition from working in this corporate space that has a lot of structure, that had a rule book, to now being in an unstructured space where you are figuring out the tools you need and the systems you need to work best. I love that quote you shared around, I live with a mental illness, I live with PTSD, and I got diagnosed 22 years after a traumatic incident. And one of the things I've had to learn, yes, there's a lot of unknowns around mental illness. But part of it, I think, is me having the knowledge of knowing, I don't know when slash if I'll get triggered, but when I do, here are the strategies that I've learned to navigate that situation and not put that weight on someone else, but at least communicate that, hey, if this happens, here's the action that I'm going to take.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
part of that too is, I mean, because there's still a meeting in the middle, right? It's like it's not necessarily saying here's what to do, but there is kind of like I may have to step out, so just expect that, right? And um, so one of the practices that we've really integrated, and we learned it from what's their name? Ah, crap! I should remember a name if I'm going to plug it, but it's an access check-in where like during filming, during like the security check, we all go around, give a brief visual description what you're doing on set, and if you have any access needs. And it's not saying like here's a list of my disabilities or diagnoses. It's just kind of saying like for me, I share well, I may need to step away if I get overwhelmed, but I'm okay and I'll take care of myself and I'll be right back. And that's all I have to say. And it's so that if they see me leaving or say I'll be back, then they're not like, where's he going? It's like, oh yeah, he
mhm.
said he might do that. We had someone on set recently. They're like, well, I go to the bathroom a lot. And so if I'm off at the bathroom, I'm fine and I'll be back. And then yep, she was at the bathroom most of the time, but no one was like, where is she? Or where's the bathroom key? It's like, okay, right. She said she needed to do that. And so, um,
How do you
yeah.
get to a place where you feel comfortable naming that?
What do you mean naming?
Like, for a lot of people, I think we haven't yet integrated it into our
Hmm.
culture to really name your access needs.
Yeah, I've been loving it. We've translated it over to now we do it for all of Lachi's sets. We bring the production because it's not usual for a music set to do that. Like security check, it's just like you're the artist, whatever. But we do it during sound checks. And so we bring everyone together. It helps Lachi specifically so that she's not just saying sound guy, like she'll know their name, or when they're talking to her, we tell like one of Lachi's accommodations. It's not just that she may not see wires and stuff, but when you're addressing her, to say your name first. So then she knows who's talking to her. And that has made our the music performance so much easier for her because she can call out the name of the sound guy or whatever. She remembers 50 people's names. I don't remember any of their fucking names. There's just that's the sound guy, that's the redheaded guy that seemed in charge, right? But like Lachi remembers all their names from that. Um, and so we're introducing it there. We're trying to introduce it in everything, right? So
Mm.
even during meetings, just on Zoom meetings, we're doing self descriptions. I like self descriptions because they connect me to the person. Like jumping on a Zoom with 10 people, I kind of don't even really remember eight of them, right? But when we do those little descriptions, it helps cement them as a person in my head, I guess. And so I found it to be an accessible tool just for myself. I also these days I watch everything with audio description because I can never remember the names of the characters. And so, but audio description, they constantly say the character names. And so that has made me enjoy things so much more. But anyway,
And you get
um,
additional context in case, I don't, you get a
yeah,
lot more.
Queen's Gambit. How can anyone watch Queen's Gambit on Netflix without the AD? You watch it with AD, it's thrilling. You watch it without it, it's just people fucking playing chess for an hour. Anyway.
As we close, I wanted to know if there's anything you want to plug.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so first of all, please check us out at Ramped. If you have anything to do with the music industry or anything to do with disability or neurodiversity, rampd.org. We are here and we are loud and we are here doing cool stuff. I check out Lachi if you don't know her. Lachi Music, LACHIMUSIC. That's her across all socials, or her website is lachimusic.com. And we also do glam canes, which are rhinestoned blind canes. I started making those for Lachi, and I make them on the side as well to order. So if you're blind or low vision and interested in something amazing for your next party, come to glamcanes.com.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Arthur. And I'm sure I actually know I'm going to see you in a few weeks because we have a meeting, but if not virtually in a few weeks, maybe in person soon.
Yeah, absolutely. No, love it. Thank you so much, Tiffany.